You really kicked up quite a bit of a kerfuffle when you started talking about how you think that growth for the quarter could get wiped out completely by this government shutdown. It got more attention yesterday when Jamie Dimon kind of referred to that fact on the J.P. Morgan conference call, I think, after reading what you had written on this. How do you do the math on it? Explain it to us.
Well, it's mostly by looking at the impact on employment, because we know how many government workers are furloughed, and we know how many essential government workers are working without pay. So the government statisticians will not remove those people who are working without pay from the data, because they will eventually be paid. Congress has passed legislation to make sure they get paid. But the people who won't be paid, as of now, they're just out of the numbers altogether. And you've got to take into account as well the impact on government contractors who aren't getting paid, and also on businesses that rely on government employees for their cash flow. So when you add all these effects together, you know, I'm not a million miles away from the administration's own estimate, which is that every week costs 0.13 percentage points of GDP growth. That doesn't sound like very much, but a quarter is 13 weeks. So it adds up if the shutdown lasts for the whole quarter, plus all these second round effects as well. So bearing in mind that Q1 wasn't looking great anyway, and there's some big seasonal adjustment problems which tend to push it down, everything looks pretty horrible. So add it all up and you get close to zero if the shutdown lasts right through the end of March.
Is this a situation where the longer it goes on, it costs more on a weekly basis? Like if you could resolve things right now, you could stem the losses, stem the pain, but every week it's a multiplier effect?
Yeah, there is, because there's people who are relying on government contracts being paid, and businesses that rely on government workers. They can hold on for a while. They can ask their creditors. The bank overdrafts can be extended for a bit. They can ask their suppliers to take longer payment terms. But eventually, everybody hits the wall, and the suppliers say, no, it's cash on delivery or nothing, and the bank says, we just can't keep extending your credit limits indefinitely. So absolutely, there's certainly some slack in the system that can be taken up for the first few weeks. But of course, we're in unprecedented territory. I can't tell you what happened the last time the government was shut down for 2 months, because it's never happened. But I'm assuming that the longer it goes on, the worse those effects become, and the harder it becomes to recover. If your small business goes bust because the federal government employees who you rely on aren't spending any money, you can't then resurrect that business, when they go back to work. So I think it does become more of a drag and a deeper hole that's harder to get out of and takes longer to get out of as well. So there really is quite a strong imperative now to find some sort of deal relatively quickly.
Ian, you also make the point that the real risk is what happens if consumer confidence or CEO confidence really plunges as a result of this, and that in itself creates more problems.
Yeah, because business and consumer confidence are wobbling now anyway, partly because of the drop in the stock market in the fourth quarter, and also the trade war. So the two things are connected, but they're not helping. And on top of that, an extended shutdown, which makes people miserable about, well, first of all, obviously that federal employees are miserable because of their jobs, but everybody else looks at the dysfunction in Washington. It doesn't make them happy. Businesses start to scale back investment plans. If you're a contractor or you're a supplier to a government contractor, you're thinking, well, how am I going to get paid? So the whole thing ripples down the chain, and it becomes much more than just simply the loss of wages for federal government employees. And again, to emphasize the point that the longer it goes on, the more difficult it is to get back to where you would have been. So some of this ground that we're losing as the shutdown lengthens, we'll never get back. If it's just a couple of weeks, everyone gets paid, they go back to work, it's fine. But if it becomes a couple of months, I think you start to see losses that you never recover.